Thank you for joining us today. My name is Marissa Ewing, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the library today. Welcome to our viewers watching over live stream as well. Before you leave today, please take a moment to fill out the evaluation form. Oh, is my mic not working? Thank you for joining us today. My name is Marissa Ewing, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the library. Welcome to our viewers watching on live stream as well. Before you leave today, please take a moment to fill out the evaluation forms on your seats. These help us plan our future programs. I'm very excited to welcome our speaker today. Raven Cook is a Fayetteville resident and graduate of the University of Arkansas with a bachelor's degree in history. She has served as an associate museum educator at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, as the Director of Education at the Mosaic Templars Cultural Center, Arkansas's Black History Museum, and as a strategic planner for various community organizations. Raven is currently completing her master's degree in art history with this research focused on the role of communication and art circulation in Black cultural spaces. So please help me welcome Raven Cook.
Thank you all so much for being here today, even with the snow. That's just lovely. I appreciate you. Today, you all are going to be helping me, supporting me, I hope, in thinking about this research that I've been doing in my graduate school experience and really through my whole life. So we're going to talk a little bit about it today. I want to begin with ensuring that I acknowledge the people who made it possible for me to be here today. First, I want to acknowledge God. I would like to acknowledge that without God, I wouldn't even be in graduate school. When I was in high school, and my mom, who is here today, will tell you, I didn't even think I was smart enough to go to college. But I had teachers and a community that saw differently and encouraged me, and I believe that was divine. So I appreciate that community, but also I appreciate the fact that my faith has been able to anchor me through some of the difficulties that would have prevented me from not finishing. And my son is also speaking as well. I want to thank the ancestors. We just got back from a trip. I'm in the Arts of Americas program at the University of Arkansas. It's an inaugural class. I see one of my cohort members. But we went to Alabama at the beginning of the year during the snowstorm. We went to Alabama earlier this year, and we visited the Legacy Museum in Montgomery. That is from Brian Stevenson's organization, the Equal Justice Initiative. And I was so moved while I was there. I've studied Black history my entire life. But going there and seeing the way that they laid out the objects, the way that they told the story of Black people was just a really important reminder that our ancestors went through so much violence, so much intimate oppression. It's incumbent upon us to ensure that we don't continue that we understand it and continue to move forward. But without our ancestors, I wouldn't be here today, and I definitely honor their sacrifice and their struggle and their spirit and hope they're with me today. I want to also thank my family, because it's been, y'all, we've been riding. Some of you all know, if you've seen me on Facebook, you know. I want to thank my mom. I would like to thank my dad, my brother, my partner, Sam, and our handsome baby boy, Jamaro, who you all might see in the back. He's not sleeping. And lastly, I'd like to thank the library for having me out today. This is a very interesting time in our country, and I'm grateful to have opportunities to share community with people and talk about my culture and my community and ways that we can move forward collectively as a country. So I appreciate every comment, every DM, every hug, every prayer, every note. I take it all in, and it really supports me and keeps me motivated. I also really encourage you today to use the feedback forms, because they will help me and my advisor be able to go through and understand how we can make this topic more clear if it's unclear, or more direct so we can get out to the public. Okay. So our goals for today are thinking about questions like, what are the traditional frameworks for discussing art in the context of race in America? How do visual Black political literacies offer a fresh perspective on art history? And we'll also examine the intersections of historical, political, and artistic movements that require using visual Black political literacies. So my thesis is, my research explores how the art collective AfriCobra utilized visual art elements and principles to engage the communities in a rapidly changing world. It also aims to establish new ways of discussing the artistic methods used for political mobilization within Black communities. So this is a very centered approach to talking about the art. We're talking about a very culturally specific identity group. And I had the privilege of seeing AfriCobra a few years ago. They came to Arkansas in a really massive exhibition called Soul of a Nation, and I had the opportunity to teach several students about AfriCobra and the power of their art. And I really, on a personal level, I really appreciated being in that space with those objects, because they reminded me in a subtle way, and maybe not so subtle, that I was in conversation with an object, but I needed words to frame that conversation. And so this research is my attempt to be able to look at an object and feel something and know that there's a discourse happening between the object and the viewer, but being able to name it is so critical and so important and so empowering when it comes to understanding the role of art in culture. So today, we're gonna go right into it. Okay. So this became a passion project when I realized that the field wasn't discussing this work of Black people, and I could be a part of introducing the dialogue, or at least try, that would start to begin a conversation in the academic field. I connected visual because it plays into this work of sightedness. I look forward to the canon reflecting on the incredible legacy of Black communities and the transmission of communication through tools for communities of people with low vision. And also, while I'm striving to use people-centered language, I apologize if anything was said incorrectly, and I ask that you provide feedback recommending appropriate language if there was any language that I used in talking about sighted and unsighted people. The term that I'm using in this framework that I'm building is centered around the visual, but also it's centered around, as I mentioned, a culturally specific genre, Black, because I wanted to emphasize the people creating a framework instead of acknowledging existing frameworks and working to resist. This act of creation is political because it reclaims power and resources from a system by creating a separate site of action for Black liberation. And lastly, literacies, because literacy focuses on a singular, instead of a singular, a plural concept of how people engage with different forms of communication, and we leverage it daily. So I'm gonna put this to the side because this is hard work. I'm gonna use this image as an example. I'd like you to take just a moment and look at it. How many of you saw this the night that it happened? Okay, got you. So this is an image of Kendrick Lamar, a Pulitzer Prize winning hip hop artist who had the opportunity to perform at the Super Bowl this year. Kendrick's performance was really important in thinking about the role of visual Black political literacies because of the way he intricately used color, line, shape, texture, all the elements of art to drive a particular message. So in this piece, we are gonna do a quick, what's called formal analysis. And for those unfamiliar with the term, a formal analysis is we're simply gonna look at the art elements being used and discuss them and just name them. So in this image, again, Kendrick Lamar stands in the center of a group of dancers dressed in red, white, and blue. The dancers make up a collective each horizontal row or line of 5 is a line of 5, while the vertical rows is 6 dancers. In culmination, it was about 60 dancers. The two sections of dancers tightly form a square shape, leaning on one another to create a depiction of the US flag. Now, while I'm not here to discuss how incredible the performance was, and it was, so you should go back and look at it if you can, it is on YouTube. I will talk about how Kendrick, as a contemporary example, is a contemporary example of visual Black political literacies. In this image, Kendrick Lamar employs the use of color as we have been socialized to understand it as patriotic. Parallel with the particular Black aesthetic, this act of using the flag and Black people leaning on each other to create this flag uses color, form, shape, and line to communicate a political message that Black people can see and understand. The art is not simply Black because Kendrick identifies racially as Black, but it employs specific cultural cues from dance moves, the song selection, and communicative breakdowns. His audience knows what he's saying, and from his cultural cues, his audience is a Black audience, leveraging the visuality of the political as active literacies. These double-sided realities were introduced to us by a scholar and civil rights leader, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, who uses his text, The Soul of Black Folk, to talk about the gift of multi-sidedness Black people have. Dr. Du Bois notes in his text, The Souls of Black Folk, the Negro is a sort of seventh son, born with the veil and gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true self-consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the revelation of the other world. Now, I argue while Dr. Du Bois sees Black people as only multi-sided through white eyes, I believe that Black people have self-consciousness, which Dr. Du Bois was a part of helping to shape in the 20th century. At the time Dr. Du Bois is writing this text, there is a similar political tone to what's happening in America today, and it was incredibly, and while being incredibly vulnerable, it breaks down this back and forth in a racialized world. Dr. Du Bois and his contemporaries did not languish in self-pity, but used that understanding of naming this system as fuel to make changes so that I could be here today. I argue that Dr. Du Bois and others instill for some, but broaden the framework of visual Black political literacies, while acknowledging the systems that make it necessary to develop in the first place. So my argument is situated in this context of American history, and Dr. Du Bois frames American history in a really particular way through the language of double consciousness. That idea of multi-sidedness is really important when discussing how we look at art and how we experience the world, our lived experiences, but it extends primarily to the relationship between the systems that Black people engage with and have to deal with and Black people, instead of it being Black people just narrating their own experiences. So it becomes this duality and this work, this labor that Black people have to endure to exist in the United States. But There are scholars who also ask and continue to encourage us to push forward in recognizing those systems by saying, like Lonnie Guinier, who was a powerful attorney and a legal scholar, she spoke about the concept of racial literacy. And in her legal work, because she was a prominent legal scholar, from racial liberalism to racial literacy, Brown versus Board of Education and the interest divergence dilemma, noting, racial literacy suggests that legal equality granted through the courts will not expatriate the distinctive racialized asymmetries from the DNA of the American dream. In this, Lonnie Guinier indicates that we must move beyond the legalese and become more transparent about how this system of racism works in America. Dr. Du Bois does the work of showing you the system, even acknowledging the system is real. But Dr. Guinier encourages us to understand the intricacies of that system. And lastly, contemporary scholars are starting to think about how this is employed in the arts. Dr. Joni Acuff Boyd and Amelia Crakey, in their text, Visual Racial Literacy, they contend with Lonnie Guinier and Dr. Du Bois and Wright. We've defined visual racial literacy as critical, creative, and ethical skills needed to interpret and respond to the visual culture of racism. We have argued elsewhere that where one lies on the spectrum, the racially literate to racially illiterate, depends upon the person who has historical knowledge and cultural familiarity with racial iconography, dominant racial narratives, and supremacist logistics embedded in visual technologies. So the authors are arguing simply that in our world, we see day-to-day visual examples of things that enforce this notion of racism, be it when you look at even in little things. So when you go to a restaurant, perhaps, and you see a menu, and on that menu there are, for example, if you look at a kid's menu, there are a list of figures who are just up and down the page. They're designed into the menu. That menu, if they're designed on this notion of caste, gives a particular message to the audience who's receiving it. It reinforces these ideas that race, in fact, does have a particular visual narrative to it. And while I apply these frameworks to my practice in art history, the framework that I am discussing, visual Black political literacies, is inserted into the art historical canon and decenters white systems to focus on Black liberation politics. So my research is about moving away from the notion that the systems that we deal with day to day are the only systems that are in place. My research goes to focus on how Black people, Black communities, Black artists use their tools to resist systems of oppression. And I look to artists who have done that, like Norman Lewis, who I argue uses an early example of visual Black political literacies. Now, Norman Lewis was an incredible artist. He was an abstract expressionist, and his catalogs of work are some of my personal favorites. But in the 1960s, Norman Lewis and his collaborators like Reginald Gammon, Emma Amos, also Romary Bearden, Hale Woodruff, and others create this collective called Spiral. And their collective in the art centers around this call and response to the civil rights movement. Now, Norman Lewis does really important work in that he is able to think about what it means to use color, line, and shape to engage with audiences about politics. And I argue this is a really important facet of political racial literacies. Now, in this piece, Lewis uses heavy line. Oh, where's my presenting? Lewis uses heavy line near the end of the piece, but as you see the progression moving forward, you notice that he starts to take lighter brush strokes, moving away from the right side of the canvas or the left side of the canvas. Norman Lewis bases this picture on a image here from Selma to Montgomery. Moneta Sleet Jr. was the photographer, and this piece I actually had the opportunity to travel this road, and it's different when you see pictures and then when you actually are on the road from Selma to Montgomery, and the experience, the weight of it feels so much different than just seeing it in picture. I encourage you to go to Alabama if you have an opportunity. There are several historical sites that can be really useful to thinking about the way that race exists in our country. But I also want to highlight the way that Norman Lewis is able to take this picture and turn it into a form of abstract expressionism with just line and black and white line. That's really important to thinking about this visual Black political literacies. Hayward Oubre is another artist that I have recently learned about and engaged with. There was a exhibition in Alabama called Structural Integrity, and that exhibition centered on this artist. I'd never heard of Hayward Oubre before, but I was really glad that I did, and really glad that I had the opportunity to know him as a art educator, as an artist, as a one who was organizing art spaces and thinking about ways that art could reach Black communities, particularly in historically Black colleges and universities. Hayward Oubre creates this piece, which is called Equilibrium, in the 1960s, the late 1960s. When we went into, and this is actually my picture, so I apologize that it's a little crooked because I took it on my phone. But when we went into the show, there was something very direct about the way that he was using color, line, and shape. It was really important to me to have a conversation with the curator about this abstract section of the show. And we discussed how Hayward Oubre actually goes into the color wheel and starts to rethink color theory and talk a little bit more about how people of Black identity engage with these different forms of color. And so then he's creating a language through the artworks that is, in fact, political, because it does intersect with the systems that exist, and they do challenge it. Now, this is abstraction, which means most people, and I hear this all the time, most people say they don't like it because they don't know what it is, they don't know how to understand it. But I encourage you to take a moment. Let's see if I got the right. Nope. Oh, okay. I encourage you to take a moment and think about what it means to see these colors, what your experience has been of those colors, what your history, what your background has been of those colors, what's your relationship to those colors, those shapes. How does this piece impact you? What is he doing with lines? How is he using these circles as well as these sharp edges? What's the goal? And if it's equilibrium, what does that represent? What does that mean? So when we're talking about visual Black political literacies, we're thinking about the ways that Black artists employ these specific tools like color, line, and shape to encourage people to see differently, not just Black people, but all people. But the work is centered in a particular Black cadence, a Black voice that is able to galvanize Black communities. Faith Ringgold is another great example of someone who uses visual Black political literacies. She passed away last year, but her work is so critically important. This is a piece that she did focused on Angela Davis, but also in a larger sense, a Black feminist perspective. In this piece, she uses particular colors, right, that are connected to a larger historical context for African Americans. She uses red, black, and green. Red, black, and green in the history of African American in the African American experience is associated to the Universal Negro Improvement Association from 1917. She's incorporating those colors because as they are known and as if you're socialized within the Black experience, and this isn't, to say that every Black person knows this, but it does acknowledge that when you see these colors, you start to say, okay, something's going on here. I might not be able to name it, but I definitely notice that she's saying something. And if it's not with the colors, perhaps it's with the words, free, women, Angela. What does that mean? So thinking about the way that she's using shape, the way she's using this illusion technique, the way she's employing triangles and using these very sharp edges, but also thinking about the intentionality of color in her use of red, black, and green is really part of that legacy of visual racial literacy. So this piece is from 1971. It's Women, Free, Angela, and it deals with the backstory is connected to Angela Davis, who is still working today to ensure that we have understanding of what liberation could look like, what it could be like, what a world with an abolitionist approach could be. Angela Davis is still working towards that end, even in this contemporary moment. But while these artists really do help me kind of galvanize my thinking around this being something that's not just in the 1960s, this particular group, AfriCobra, is the group that I'm focused on in my research. AfriCobra is built in 1968, and it's part of what's called the Black Arts Movement. The Black Arts Movement is an extension of the Black Power movement, and Black Power is a socio-political theory that reflects Black Americans' need to build their own community in an adverse society. So you have people like Kwame Ture or Stokely Carmichael, Willie Ricks, Charles V. Hamilton, and others who are articulating and constructing this theory of Black Power. The cultural expression of Black Power is embodied through the Black Arts Movement. So it's led by people like Amiri Baraka or Sonia Sanchez, Toni Morrison's intentionality with using Black figures in her work, Larry Neal. These authors provide a unique lens for expressing the political dimension of Black Power through the arts and culture. Now, colloquially, Black Power acknowledges one's deep connection to African ancestry and a commitment to labor for the liberation of Black people. But the political aesthetics of Black Power are like afros, dashikis, leather jackets, dark sunglasses, and berets. Now, during the 60s, artists grappled with how to engage with this art world. Am I just a Black artist or am I just an artist? Should my work reflect the movement or should it strive to be free of politics? And AfriCobra's original members collaborated in Chicago through an organization called it's called OBASI, or the Organization of Black American Culture. And this organization had a significant influence in the Black arts movement in the 1960s, 1967 in particular. At the end of OBASI, one of the organizers from the collective, who was an Arkansas native, Jeff Donaldson, gathered textile artists, painters, photographers, and other artists working in diverse mediums, and he founded AfriCobra. Now, in 1967, OBASI is building spaces. They're putting together spaces like the Wall of Respect, which is here, which highlights particular African-American figures in the Black experience to celebrate. So Charlie Parker, Malcolm X, Dr. King, Marcus Garvey. They're painted by artists in OBASI, and there are efforts to help the people see these figures and have pride. So the larger goal is a communication between the community and the artists, once again emphasizing that Black visual political literacy. Now, for this project, I used the American Art Archives and a lot of oral history projects, particularly history makers, and I listened to the founders speak about their experiences, and I also read manifestos and artist statements in the original, from the original members. I'm grateful for the primary scholarship that narrates this collective's existence in the world. And I want to use one of the key resources, Jeff Donaldson's Artist Manifesto, to explore how the organization of AfriCobra mobilizes visual Black political literacies through aesthetics and philosophy. So we'll start with thinking about color. Some of you might have already seen these images, but I'm going to talk about them. So in the manifesto, I'm going to read the manifesto, what it says, and then I'll provide analysis. In the manifesto, 10 in Search of Nation, Jeff Donaldson writes, color, 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 color that shines, color that is free of rules and regulations, color that shines, color that is awesomely expressive, color that defines, identifies, and directs, color, super real color for super real images, the super reality that is our everyday, all day thing. Color as bright and real as the color dealing with the streets of Watts and the South Side and 4th Street and in Roxbury and in Harlem, Port-au-Prince, and also Dakar, Johannesburg, and everywhere we are. Kool-Aid colors for Kool-Aid images for super real people. Super real images for super real people. Now, Donaldson's premise is clearly evidenced in the two works of art here by Wadsworth Gerald on this side and Carolyn Mims Lawrence. Both pieces intentionally use Kool-Aid colors to draw the viewer into the artwork. The emphasis on color in Wadsworth Gerald's piece positions the figure in a circular sweeping motion. And that circular sweeping motion gives an illusion of movement and all being created with the repetition of letters. Gerald also refrains from using color on the right side of the composition, so there's a space where there's limited color, but the weight of the color and language is on the left side. And the depiction of Black princes of the leader El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz or Minister Malcolm X. In contrast, Carolyn Mims Lawrence uses the entirety of her canvas to present an unequivocal message to Black women, while Gerald's prince flows, so this one's Carolyn Mims, and while Wadsworth Gerald's Black prince flows, Carolyn Mims Lawrence piece presents a more punchy image with heavy uses of line. But I also want to acknowledge that AfriCobra has particular ways that they approach art. So their manifesto, their aesthetics are all collectively tied to the group's collective resources, the way they're able to connect with their artists' mediums, and in so doing, that medium becomes a larger part of this community labor. The next section to think about is language, and Jeff Donaldson writes, check out the image. The words are an attempt to posit where we are coming from and to introduce where we are going. So in these two works of art, while words played a central role in each of AfriCobra's works, it exists as a focal point in Unite by Barbara Jones Hogu and Uhuru by Nelson Stevens. Jones's Unite complicates perspective and line, introducing a patterned repetition of the word unite. With fists of resistance shadowed in a V shape, the figures at the bottom of the work all seem to be one, as there are no divisions, acknowledging that these people are not separate. And Jones Hogu presents the words unite and it seemingly weaves into the crowd, with only one figure looking forward at the audience. Now, contrastingly, Nelson Stevens' work, which Uhuru means freedom in Swahili, abstracts the figure, but seemingly crowns the figure as free and liberated. The man in a cacophony of the Kool-Aid colors, the Kool-Aid being associated with the drink, but they're not in relationship. So Kool-Aid is Koolaid. But AfriCobra takes that concept of Kool-Aid colors and they change it and make it COOLADE. They do this subtly because they don't want the influence of capitalism and all that imposing on what they're trying to do. This is a group that is very much centered on the liberation of Black people. And so in an effort to connect to Black people and use language that connects to Black people, Kool-Aid colors come about. So you have colors like grape, cherry, and lemon in the Uhuru work, which is simply purple, red, and yellow. And it expresses a monument's disposition and gazes away from the viewer, but it seems that Stevens has used Uhuru to connect an African identity through the diaspora. It is important to note the goal of the collective-centered is sensorial. So the collective worked focused on sensorial connection and interpretation, not just intellectual. But language was important in the backgrounds of the image. Lastly, we'll talk a little bit about materials and circulation. AfriCobra's position on materials and circulation in 10 in Search of Nation read, this poster art images which we deal with concepts that offer positive and feasible solutions to our individual, local, national, international, and cosmic problems. The images are designed with the idea of mass production. An image that is valuable because it is an original or is not, or is unique is not a work of art. It is economics, and we are not economists. We want everybody to have some. So in these two works of art with materials, Jeff Donaldson, who writes 10 in Search of Nation, suggests we want everybody to have some and makes a distinction between economics and art. In this work of art done by Donaldson, The Wives of Sango, we have a Pan-African approach in that we're thinking about mythologies from African religious backgrounds, but then we also have a liberatory politic here in Liberation Soldiers that gathers imagery of the Black Panther Party. So we have these two groups that are working in tandem to talk about this kind of mythology, this religion, and also tied to this spirituality, but also a collective mobilization of Black people. So my argument in totality is that visual Black political literacies step into the canon of art history and shout, "This is for us, by us." The act is connected to the long history of upholding the flag and working to define our lives on our own terms. And AfriCobra models that through the ways that they disseminate their art. Thank you all. Have a great day. Are there any questions? Yes.
Yes. I was just wondering, I can't remember his name, but where you said that on the right side it was more void of color, do you think he did that on purpose?
Absolutely. I think each artist has a particular way that they want their art to exist in the world, and they're very intentional about putting color, line, and shape, texture, all the materials together to be able to execute that. Great question. Thank you. Yes?
A few years back, I was really blown away by an exhibit of Carol Walker's work, similarly with Betty Saar, and I just wonder if you include them in your Black visual or how that, just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do
connect Betty Saar to visual Black political literacies, as she's working very directly to incorporate messaging to Black people about Black life. Carol Walker, on the other hand, I do not incorporate into visual black political literacies, as she's doing more work around the systems in which black people have to deal with. So the subtlety of it is when black people are narrating their own experiences, their own realities, and putting it into art as a way to say, let's all move forward together, as opposed to thinking about the way that the systems of racism and oppression narrate black life. Okay, cool. Me too. Thank you. Yes?
Someone wanted to obtain this art. Is that possible? Are they lithographs or where?
That's a great
Can
question.
you repeat it? I'm sorry, I can't hear it.
Yes, the
Question was, if someone would like to acquire this art, how would you access it? And there are a number of ways that you can get this particular print. It is available at several museums, so it'd really be thinking about where the piece is, and do they have a store or some kind of collection that would be able to give you the print. They used to have it at Crystal Bridges. I don't know if they still do, but there also are a lot of museums in Chicago where these artworks are from, like Barbara Jones Hogu's Unite is part of the School of Art in Chicago. So a lot of these works can be acquired, or at least not acquired, but at least seen in museums, more so in Chicago, because that's where the group was founded. Yes?
The Historic Arkansas Museum in Little Rock, if they still have them, they had a whole lot of Faith Ringgold greeting cards.
Yes.
Yeah, so the Historic Museum of Arkansas has a lot of Faith Ringgold greeting cards, so that's another way to access some of the art. So that's a great resource. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? Yes, Ms.
I have a comment. Could you call up that abstract? The first one that you showed? That, back up. Thank you for having that one in this presentation. I'm 92. I grew up with the Chicago Art Institute's Impressionists. And suddenly the explosion of abstraction, 60s, 70s, all the way through. And this piece speaks so loudly and clearly that I'm wishing I could get back to the Institute and see if they've got some abstracts so that I could find in them this kind of power.
energy.
That is amazing. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you.
Ms. Sue, this work of art also grabbed me at the Birmingham Museum of Art when we went to go see the show, Structural Integrity. And I want to emphasize that while this framework that I'm building is centered on the way that Black Americans are speaking to other Black Americans, it's not limited to just Black Americans. If you are for the liberation and humanity of Black people, and you can see the ways that Black people have gone through history and been able to overcome these challenges, and you can read through some of the cultural cues, you can read this art and you'll have a literacy as well. So it's not limited by the group, but it is something that the group has produced, and it is something within the academy that doesn't center whiteness. It centers Black people and Black voices and Black cues, cultural cues that are able to narrate a political movement. Are there any questions on that? Yes.
When you started your talk, you briefly mentioned this, how certain objects just attract you and pull you in. And I just find that so fascinating in my life. And I think it's such a primitive thing. It goes back hundreds of thousands of years, you know, in the human genome. It's like a response to something. It almost makes me feel like we have a totem animal or something. I mean, do you have any, it's all psychology and I don't know much about it. So
Yeah.
I wonder in your research, have you thought about that or dealt with that?
Yes, I definitely think and have researched this idea of psychology and how it intertwines. And even as a former museum educator and a museum education director, I have had an opportunity through career experience as well as research to think about the ways that artists are using the canvas. And my position in this research, which is not, which is limited in the canon rather, is that Black people are doing something very specific in their bodies of work because they're going through something really specific. And so in order to communicate to each other about how to overcome or how to endure that specific thing they're going through, they use colors, lines, and shapes that are connected to the culture in which they are from. So it's simply just arguing that, yes, you know, anyone can be moved by that, but to have a literacy of red, black, and green, for example, it moves you in a different way because you understand the artist is doing something with history and they're doing something with a political statement. That's another layer, exactly. Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry I was late, but I saw some pictures in flashback.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is amazing, beautiful, and very powerful. And it's says something, okay? It's about the black, okay?
Yeah.
You don't mind me say that. And but black, whenever I think about black people, I'm always thinking of the friendly faces. And when I was in China, you know, and we have the posters about the black people, black kids, cute, and the watermelons. And we were educated very friendly, okay? And these days, some radical, like the radical feminism, radical resist, kind of radicals, okay? Radical, not good ones, okay? Too extreme, too radical ones. It's happening. But I am thinking, yeah, specific something Black people has gone through, it's really bad, and they have gone through very hard, but they're still very inspiring, nice. I love, I have so many, I don't want to say black, you know, I have students, they don't want me to say that, but I'm yellow, okay, so how can we get out the good things and continue to do that good things, benefit people's life, inspire?
Absolutely.
Yeah, huh?
I definitely appreciate your comment, and I encourage you to think about what may be hesitancies around you using terms like black or, yeah, like why, you know, like why? What does that mean in our culture to say that? Or to have that feeling like, ooh, I don't know if I should do that. But like your experience in learning about Black cultures through imagery has, from what I'm hearing, been mostly centered around a particular way that racism has constructed Black imagery. So to say, you know, watermelons and things like that, that's a narrative that has been placed upon Black people rather than the narrative they create for themselves. So in order to be able to share these messages, we have to have a balance of sharing, you know, the positive things, the beautiful things that Black people have done and experienced, but we also have to do the work of sharing the systems that Black people have to deal with that are real and visible and take part in our daily lives and how we move through the world. But thank you so much. Thank you so much.
It's universal there.
Absolutely.
And the friendly things there, and
Yes.
not only those rival things, you know.
Yes.
Only one part is true existed,
Absolutely.
but more is universal,
Absolutely.
inspiring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Liberation
Is not racial, it's centered on humanity. But as Black people have had to employ it in a racialized world, it has had to become something that galvanizes the community. But it is for all people, and there are incredible scholars like the Combahee River Collective, who were Black feminists in the 1970s, who argue that once Black people are once we're able to have discussions about Black history and systems that have been a part of American life, then we'll be able to come up collectively together because we'll all have a concomitant belief that we don't want to go back there. but we hesitate because of the feelings that are associated with some of the stories and accounts and things that we deal with as a country.
Positive things. We need
Absolutely.
to unite, not make more troubles or more rival things. It's horrible.
Absolutely.
And oh my God.
There's-
And America is such a wonderful country.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always telling my son, think about the Lincoln. Oh my God, what a job he has done, you know.
Absolutely.
And American is amazing, but I don't like people blame Trump and they use. I don't know. I don't want to say they lie. Their understanding is not right. So art can be education. You know,
Yes.
educate people to think rightly, positively,
Definitely.
not just fighting with each other.
Mhm,
And I saw so many. I'm so sorry. I did saw political wrong things about the black things. That is harming black people.
Right.
And some political people and some professors, they say it does not make sense to me, and they're too much.
Yeah.
There's too much, and they don't recognize the good things of other people. And so, this is a wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank
how
you.
to define what is black and how to define this black experience in the research can help all human beings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. There are strategies, there are methods, there are ways that people are working in academia, but also just in life to be able to, yes, very much so. Ministers, a number of different people, a number of different communities and identities are working to share these stories and make them accessible. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's an incredible museum in Alabama, in Montgomery, that does the work of telling hard truths, but also reiterating that black people are survivors and we survive through that. And that's a visual site. That's a place you can go and actually interact with objects and understand and get more clarity on the structure and how we can, as a culture, ensure we don't go back.
The survivors survive. It's not because they're smart, not because they fight all the time. Yeah, they do need to defend dissent and self-esteem. Okay, all this, but not just the aggressive, meaning things. Narrow-minded. They survive because they have good heart. They defend themselves, but don't do harm to others.
Right.
So that is the thing. So I'm worrying about the many artistic and the political and the academic researchers going on the wrong way. And they spend a lot of money and mislead people and make more troubles. They forgot their hearts.
Right.
I'm sorry I speak too much.
I want to
Find a heart back.
I want to acknowledge it.
there are some of us in the academy that are working from the heart, and this presentation, this research that I've been doing, even while giving birth to my son through a number of different challenges, is connected to my heart. It's connected to my community. It's connected to America. Yeah, and wanting to see America be better. Thank you so much.
I just want to say, I know from Facebook that you have been raising a baby
Yes.
while you've been in grad
Graduate
school,
school.
and then you're doing this amazing presentation.
Absolutely.
And I just wonder, who are you?
Okay, thank you, Brian. I really don't know. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's all been the grace of God. I identify as a believer, a Christian, so that's my religious tradition. But I definitely believe that has helped me get through this experience. Also, my cohort having incredible. It was 6 of us who began this journey. Jamila is behind us. It was 6 of us who began this journey at the University of Arkansas, totally unsure of what was happening, what was going to happen, how we were going to do it. But we held each other up. We had great professors who cared about us and held us up. But our families, my mama held the line, okay? She held the line. My partner held the line. And my brother, my dad, a lot of my family was just there for me in the trenches, taking care of my baby, as you see him in the back with my mom. So that's how I got through. That's how I'm up here. That's it. It's not me. Not me at all. Yes.
You kind of work, as we heard, more in like the political and statement world, but how, as a woman in the artistic sphere and minority
Absolutely.
artists in general, how would you work towards, or what is your advice in highlighting Black art, minority art that is already throughout our day-to-day but might not be recognizable to the untrained eye or even the trained eye who is, not seeing it?
Absolutely.
This particular work is about connecting to culture, right? It's asking you to take authentic steps to learn more about the Black experience, right? To learn about Faith Ringgold's red, black, and green use of red, black, and green is just a book away. It's books actually upstairs, because this library has a wonderful selection of books that deal with race in America. So the understanding of the UNIA and what they meant, how they moved, why they moved, that would be a way to be able to catch some of the things that you see in the artworks, right? So even Kendrick Lamar's performance, listen to an album, just engage with, and I'm gonna tell you my favorite album so that you can engage with it. To Pimp a Butterfly is his best album, and I stand on it forever. Brian, yes, I stand on it forever. But To Pimp a Butterfly is situated in thinking about the construct of America and how a Black man should move within it. And there's one particular song that has gotten me through since 2016, and that's called We Gonna Be Alright. And that's how we build this language, this identification. Even watching videos, watching some of the hip-hop videos, they're giving you clues, they're giving you cues. You just gotta connect and make sure that that connection is really about you wanting to be connected in a way that's not, a way that embraces the culture and encourages others to embrace the culture, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question? Okay, a little bit. All right, if you got more, you can talk to me. That's fine. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I appreciated the artists in the artwork. I'm an educator, and I look forward to trying to pull some of that out. And I work remotely, but I use whoever this, I'm blanking on her name, the one we
Ringo.
Yes, I've used some of her stuff for I'm a speech pathologist, but I
Yes.
teach the kids about it, and then we use it for describing
Absolutely.
and things like that. So I just wanted to say thank you, because
Absolutely.
I got sparked for some creativity.
Of course. And I
Definitely encourage you as an educator to look at the work of Hayward Oubre, who actually recreates the color wheel, and he does a different interpretation of the color wheel, which could be really interesting, and thinking about how your students engage with the color wheel. What does color mean to them? What does red mean? What does blue mean? Like these different ways that kids can find how to interpret art for themselves and critically think about what it takes to do so. That could be a cool activity also. But thank you for your service too, for helping in the community out, especially in these times. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Yes.
Being an Arkansas native, but not from Fayetteville, I'm from Jonesboro, what are some things that I can do here?
Yeah.
Being a Black woman, a person of color in the community, that I could, like you said, kind of immerse myself more
Yeah.
in the arts aside from the library. Like, are you from here?
So I'm originally from Little Rock.
I'm originally from Little Rock, but my family has lived up here a long time. We moved up here in 2008 for better educational opportunities, and I graduated from the University of Arkansas. So I've been here for a little while, but this is a really precarious time in Black culture locally. People are trying to decipher what we can do, what is possible, what we have capacity for as a collective, or what we should be thinking about doing. There is a event coming up, the Black Expo. It's next weekend, next Saturday, and that could potentially lead you to more connections of nonprofits in the area. There are incredible art studios like My Tea by Design. It's on College, that do a lot of work in thinking about Black American culture. There are great organizations like Visionary Working and the Black Heritage organization. But you really have to, I would say, pull up to next week's event. Like, that's how you get the information. And once you, I know, we got, and you can always contact me. This is an opportunity. Maybe you and I are here so we can link up. You feel me? So just let me know. All right, babe. You're welcome. Yes.
Any other questions?
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. Have a wonderful week, and stay warm and enjoy your week. And continue to let that heart and light shine. Absolutely. Thank you.